Hi everyone. I wanted to take a moment and comment on the recent video upload by Thunderf00t regarding Stefan Molyneux. I can already hear some in the background saying, Mike, don't do it, don't do it. This is not going to be a defense of Stefan Molyneux. That's his job, and I'm sure he'll avail himself quite well of that. But the video by Thunderf00t caused me a lot of concerns. Now, I will say, I've been a subscriber to both of them for quite a while. I also recognize that they share very few views in common. I don't necessarily subscribe to people because I 100% agree with their policies or their ideas on anything. I'm quite critical of a lot of things that Stefan Molyneux has had to say. However, some of the logic that he puts forth makes sense to me, I agree with, and so I'm interested to hear what he says whenever he says it, despite his tendency towards hyperbole and repetitiveness and some pretty outlandish hyperbole at times. I find there sometimes to be value in what he's saying, and sometimes more importantly, the guests that he has on his show. However, I do disagree quite strongly with a lot of the things that he says. Quite recently, actually, he made some comments about the death of Robin Williams that I disagreed with. And I reacted quite strongly, although most of you didn't see it, because I made a video where I talked a little bit about some things that I'd noticed with regards to Robin Williams' suicide. And GeoAngle had commented on my video that he felt that I had simply rehashed Stefan Molyneux's video, that I should have just linked his video. It was sort of a cloaked charge of plagiarism. And I responded very strongly to GeoAngle via a private video message where I really let him have it. And part of the reason that I was so angry was because I did not echo Molyneux's thesis about the reason why Robin Williams had killed himself, because I strongly disagreed with his thesis. And actually, he later reversed that on a show with Joe Rogan, where Joe Rogan had confronted him on this. And so again, I strongly disagree with him on many points, but some of the arguments that he puts forth, I do agree with, and so I separate the character from the arguments. There is an air about him that some people don't like. There's some arrogance there, and there's some would even probably say creepiness, especially in his older videos. But that's got nothing to do with the arguments. That's the whole point of being rational, is we don't let those things interfere with our ability to perceive the concepts and analyze them on their own basis, right? The issue that I have with Thunderf00t's video is it's highly misrepresentative. It says Stefan Molyneux busted, I think, on there. And he starts out with the charge that Molyneux lied about his wife being reprimanded for her use of her distilling of sort of psychiatric advice, basically, on the call-in show. Now, if he'd have left it there, I think he'd had a good video. I think I'm going to subtitle this video something about why Thunderf00t's video about Stefan Molyneux causes me concerns about both. Because Molyneux clearly on the Joe Rogan show, and I listened to that show when it came out, clearly said that none of that was true, that his wife was never reprimanded, there were no repercussions from it. They'd asked some questions about the podcast, and that was about it. Now, Thunderf00t has done some research, and he's come up with some documentation stating possibly otherwise. Now, I would probably reserve final judgment until I've heard Stefan Molyneux's response to that, but it looks kind of damning, right? And that causes me more concern about a person that I already had some concerns with, Stefan Molyneux, especially when it comes to outright, just bald-faced lying. But again, I'll reserve final judgment until I've seen his response to that. That's what we're supposed to do in countries where we don't recognize kangaroo courts, right? So that causes me some concerns. And had Thunderf00t left it there, I think he'd had a good video. The problem is the absolute outrageous and very hyperbolic misrepresentations that he makes from that point forward. Now, I'm not sure if it has to do with a lack of research on his part, which doesn't bode well for the type of language that he was using. He equated Molyneux with Elliot Rodgers, with Scientology, called him batshit crazy, seem to make fun of the fact that Stefan Molyneux doesn't know that hell isn't real, which is not the case, of course. This all speaks to me towards a little bit more of an intentional, deliberate smear campaign. This is a hit piece. This video is a hit piece. And that causes me concerns about Thunderfoot. Because, for instance, he misrepresents a lot of the things that Stefan Molyneux says and uses some video footage that I don't think is from Molyneux's own channel. It's from another guy who has already taken some things out of context and made another video. Because it took me a while to find the original video that the content came from so that I could find the context, because that's usually a little bit important, right? This causes me concern because we're quite often, when we watch YouTube videos, it's fairly pedestrian activity. And if we have any kind of trust and faith in the person that we're watching, then we kind of start to take things a little bit for granted. And I may have been guilty of this. So for instance, in a lot of his work about feminists and about Anita Sarkeesian specifically, now I'm questioning my support for some of the things he said in those videos if he used the same sort of research and misrepresentations in those videos, which I have not any real knowledge of aside from his videos that he's used here, where I have some knowledge of some of the things that Stefan Molyneux actually says and actually advocates. So he says in the video that there are several ways you can identify a cult. So he's going along the lines of Molyneux is a cult leader. One is that they are intolerant to criticism, which is completely BS. He uses this idea that Molyneux puts forth in one of his videos that you should disassociate with people who would consent to your being killed for disagreeing with them. And what he means by that is, if we disagree about, say, the war in Iraq, do you advocate the use of force against me if I disagree with you? Because if I disagree that we should go into Iraq, I should be able to not pay for it, right? You're advocating the use of force against me for following my moral principles here. And therefore, I don't really feel like having a lunch date with you, for instance. Now, is it hyperbolic to take it all the way to that end and say, you know, if I resist taxation because I don't want to pay for the war in Iraq based on my own moral principles, that you're advocating that I be killed simply because that could be the ultimate end of that? You know, if you resist paying taxes, ultimately you could end up in jail or shot if you resist all the way. Is it hyperbolic to say that? Well, perhaps, but that's not to say that on some Scientology level, disassociation, which is what Thunderfoot alludes to in the video, you know, that's not what he's advocating for. And then he combines this with Stefan Molyneux's advocation of the principle of defooing, which is disassociating with your family of origin, F-O-O, foo. And the way Thunderfoot frames it is for sort of disagreeing with your particular strain of political beliefs or something like that, which is not what the defooing argument is about. Now, first of all, I only know of one instance where Stefan Molyneux actually told an individual that they should disassociate with their family of origin. It was a very specific case. Generally speaking, he advocates for it, but he doesn't tell people that they should do it. And it's a highly misrepresentative to frame it as though, hey, if you disagree with me, then, you know, or people who disagree with you should be disconnected from your life. In the defooing example, he's talking about unrepentant abusers. The key here being unrepentant. So if your father was raping you as a child and your mother knew about it and said nothing, should you continue that cycle of abuse as an adult by continuing to go to Thanksgiving dinners and going to all kinds of family events with these people who maybe are keeping that little family secret, or are telling you you're making a big deal out of nothing if you try to get some sort of help for that? That maybe it's a better idea for you personally to end the cycle of abuse yourself by saying, I cannot continue to associate with unrepentant child abusers. And you know, obviously that's not healthy. It's not healthy for that situation. It's not healthy even for the abusers, and it's certainly not healthy for society. And he makes the argument that this is a similar thing that we would say to women who have been abused by their husbands, that we would never say to a woman, no, you said till death do us part, so you got to continue to associate with that guy no matter what, right? We would never say that. And that's the argument that he's making. It's got nothing to do with some sort of Scientology level family wrecking, as Thunderfoot put it. It's pretty misrepresentative of what he actually advocates for. Now, the way that Thunderfoot combines this with little clips of Stefan Molyneux and his, what he calls his against me argument, these seemingly, you know, these are admittedly quite creepy looking videos. They're earlier works of his 6 or 7 years ago. Is also highly misrepresentative, and I think intentionally so, because he has not provided any of the context whatsoever. So this is the part where Molyneux is saying, I would not associate with anyone who advocates the use of violence against me for simply disagreeing with them. And so, you know, through this talk of Scientology and cults, what Thunderfoot is doing is painting this picture of people being whisked away. Come and join our organization. You know, you're now under my spell, and disassociate from all your friends and family, and we'll just have the Men in Black style guys with the suits and dark sunglasses and a microphone standing outside, you know, to fend off your friends and family members. They're hoping to catch a glimpse of Tommy or Sally through the window as they've been taken away by this gray faceless organization, right? And that's not the case at all. If you watch the video, it's a message to libertarians. He's speaking to people who say that the initiation of the use of force is wrong, that government use of force is wrong. And what he's saying is, you're not making any real change in the world, and you're not living your principles if you just continue to sort of campaign for Ron Paul or whatever libertarian du jour you think is going to make the change in the world that you want to see. What he's saying is that's not working historically. It's been proven not to work. And what you need to do is live consistent with your values. And instead of getting together with people and talking about violence in the abstract, personalize the violence, and you cut through a lot of BS. So you ask the question, do you advocate the use of force or violence against me if I disagree with you? I.e., if you are for the war in Iraq and I am against, I am not condoning the use of force against you for agreeing with the war in Iraq. Do you condone the use of force against me for not wishing to participate financially in the war in Iraq? And that this cuts through a lot of bullshit, and it maintains a consistency with your own principles. So to take this and make it seem as though this is this Scientology level home wrecking, as Thunderfoot said, is extremely misleading. And he likewise does the same thing with this argument that Molyneux puts forth about women and their choosing assholes to have children with. So Molyneux makes this argument that says we need to hold women fucking accountable for having children with assholes, referring to the, you know, single parent home issue and the increases in crime rates and things like that. And Thunderfoot takes that, when Molyneux says that they should be held accountable, to mean punishment. And nowhere, I would challenge anyone to find a video clip, and I would be happy to stand corrected if that were the case, where Molyneux says we need to punish women for their choices of assholes to have children with. When he says accountable, and if you watched the videos, and again, they are difficult to watch, and I will, you know, again, I'm highly critical of Molyneux's delivery and his hyperbole and everything else, but he makes some valid points. If you watch the videos and you can sit through that, what you'll find, and what he's saying is society is focused all on the men. We're all focused on the assholes, the guys who leave the, you know, children in these single parent homes, etc., etc., etc. And what Molyneux is saying is we're forgetting one half of the puzzle, and that he has more respect for women than to remove all of their choice in the matter, all of their decision making in the matter, all of their responsibility in the matter. That's the argument that he's making. Not that they should be somehow punished, which Thunderfoot then takes all the way to the Elliot Rodgers extent, where he was personalizing things, right? Elliot Rodgers was saying they need to be punished because they were going after the assholes when there's all these nice guys like me who never get to have any love, right? It was all personal, and it was obviously deranged, and it wasn't a logical argument. Now, I think, quite often Molyneux's logical arguments do get lost in his hyperbole and his aggression and his, very, very flowery language. And that's unfortunate, but I don't think it's unfortunate or deserving of having it run all the way to the extensions of Scientology and Elliot Rodgers. As just uncalled for, and I think in that sense this is a hit piece. And he goes on to talk about Molyneux's followers, which I guess I'm one, if for no other reason that I subscribe. I'm also a Thunderfoot follower in that regard. That they're very loyal, and that this makes sense in light of some of the things that he's gotten them to believe. This goes along, I think, to some degree with his accusation that Molyneux is intolerant of criticism, which is a bunch of BS. First of all, I'm highly critical of Molyneux as one of his subscribers. To say that he's intolerant to criticism is very interesting when Thunderfoot has been invited to public discourse by Stefan Molyneux. He invites his critics to public discourse, and he specifically has invited Thunderfoot to a debate. So, intolerant to criticism, I don't think so. Also, there's a standing policy on Molyneux's show. I think he does a call-in show twice a week. And they have a standing policy. Now, people line up. They have to sign up to be a part of this call-in show. People call in with, relationship problems and different things like that. There's a waiting list for that. And they have to write in and say, here's what I want to talk about, and et cetera, et cetera. And they'll call in, every week hoping that they're going to get chosen, that they've moved up in the queue. But they have a standing policy. Anyone who disagrees fundamentally with Stefan Molyneux goes right to the front of the queue. So to say intolerant to criticism is just completely inaccurate, and unfortunately I think that was intentional, because I think it fits the narrative that Thunderfoot is trying to paint, and I'm not sure why. If it is because he disagrees with Molyneux's stance on anarchism, and once again, there's a gross misrepresentation in there, because he says in the video that Molyneux thinks that the world could somehow exist without laws, and that's not what Molyneux's definition of anarchism is. It's not without rules, it's without rulers. And so this is either a lack of research on Thunderfoot's part, which is unfortunate given the level of vitriol and the hyperbole that he displays in his attack video, or it's an intentional misrepresentation, which makes it no better than his accusations of Stefan Molyneux covering for his wife's suspension, etc., etc. And in the video that Molyneux makes, where he makes his against me argument, at one point, after saying the libertarians should, if they want to remain consistent with their principles, use this against me argument to get through the abstractions and cut down to the meat of the argument, he said, I mean, you can do whatever you want. Did Jim Jones give that option to his people? I'm not sure. So I have to say, before watching this video, I had a lot of concerns and criticisms of Stefan Molyneux. I didn't have very many about Thunderfoot, and unfortunately after watching this video, I do. I think this video illuminates a lot more about Thunderfoot than it does about Molyneux, because most people who already knew Molyneux, they already knew about his hyperbole and his repetitiveness and some of his bad arguments, etc., etc. But I think a lot of us had a lot more faith in Thunderfoot. And it's causing me to question a lot of the things, a lot of the videos of Thunderfoots that I've watched in the past and been supportive of. And it's illuminated for me a need to not be quite so pedestrian when sort of ingesting some of this information that I see on YouTube. Thanks for watching.